Hey, what's up guys? So in this video, we're gonna go over all of the new and recently updated radar detectors. Now, the last time I did a video like this was back in September of 2022, about 6 months ago, and a lot has happened since. And so in this video, let's go ahead and run through a list of all the highlights as far as all the new detectors that have come out, all of the changes that we've seen, and basically all the stuff that's happened over the past 6 months. All right, so starting off, let's begin with Escort. First off, we've got some updates to the Escort Max 360C Mark II, the Redline 360C, and the Redline 360C International. Escort's made a bunch of photo radar improvements, including adding or improving support for guns like the Mesta Fusion, the Mesta 210C, the Red Flex, the Gatso RT3 and RT4, and multi-radar. They've also made improvements to the Ka-band ramp-up. They've made some improvements to the K-band responsiveness. There's been some blind spot filtering improvements, as well as some general DSP improvements and some bug fixes. And so a lot of really nice improvements here. Now, we've noticed in testing after with these new firmwares, we're still seeing some delays against certain K-band guns like the Decatur Genesis 2s, for example. I know Escort continues to work on it and make further improvements, but nevertheless, I'm glad to see that they're working on that. And they're improving a variety of things here across the board with these Blackfin DSP detectors. Speaking of which, Escort has also just announced a brand new detector. It's the Max 360 Mark II. Not the 360C Mark II, the 360 Mark II. This is basically the successor to the original Max 360 that was released almost 8 years ago. It's the Max 360 Mark II. And this detector is essentially the Max 360C Mark II, just without the Wi-Fi capabilities. And it's going to cost $100 less than the Wi-Fi version. And if you'd like to learn more about the improvements between the original Max 360 and this new Max 360 Mark II, I've got an article on my website that goes over more information between the original and the Mark II. And a link to that article, along with pretty much everything else that I talk about here in this video, you can find down linked below underneath the like button. Then the next thing that they've introduced might actually be one of my favorite things. It's the successor to their custom installed Max CI 360. It's called the Redline CI 360C. And it looks like it's basically going to be solving a lot of my biggest complaints that I've had with the Max CI 360. It's going to be adding Wi-Fi, of course, but the main thing is that it's going to be based on the Redline platform, and it's going to be getting the more advanced antennas for both the front and for the rear radar antenna, not just for the front, like with the Max CI 360. It's also going to add photo radar detection, and Escort is making some improvements with their next generation laser jammers. I'll talk about their new laser jammers kind of toward the end of the video after we first focus on all the new radar detectors. Next, moving on, let's go ahead and take a look at all the new updates here from Uniden. Now let's start by talking about the latest updates here for the Uniden R4 and the R8. With these two detectors, Uniden has finally activated the Bluetooth capability built into the detectors. And so now with these latest updates, you're going to have the ability to actually pair your phone with your detector and then run an app. Currently at this time, it's Highway Radar. That's the only app that you can pair with your detectors, and that app is only available for Android. But if you're running an Android phone, you're going to be able to use Highway Radar to add some additional functionality to your detector. You're going to be able to control the detector from your phone, change settings on your detector, or even add some additional false alert filtering capabilities using the app itself. At this time, there's no iOS apps that are available yet, and Uniden is choosing not to release any of their own apps at all. So it's pretty much just third-party developers who want to create apps, and currently, Highway Radar is the only app that's available. Next, speaking of third-party stuff, there's now a third-party firmware that's available for the Uniden R3 called the R3 SE. I just did a video about this as well that you can check out, but it adds a bunch of extra cool functionality here to your R3, including the ability to automatically vary the detector speed or sensitivity based on speed, to improve the GPS lockouts, to add additional K-blocks to give you capabilities for filtering out Mazda CX-5 BSMs, for example. So a lot of really nice updates here with this custom firmware. Now, this firmware, the R3 SE, it's actually based off of the custom firmware that was built originally for the Uniden R7. For the R7, if you want, you can pick up version 1.50 from Mitheru, who's made these firmwares for both detectors. And this firmware has all the same capabilities that the R3 SE has, but just for the R7. It was first on the R7 and then on the R3 SE. However, the R7 version of the firmware also has some additional features to help make that detector more stealthy and less detectable by the specters. Now, this is something that I still need to go out and do some testing with, and now that the weather's finally starting to get better as we're getting through winter, I'd like to go out and do some testing to see kind of the effectiveness of the new RDD immunity features in this custom firmware. But for those of you guys who run an R7, there's a lot of really nice improvements here in this firmware version as well. I've been running it for a little while now, and I actually really like it. And then finally, as far as the Uniden updates, let's talk about the Uniden R9. Well, we've had a chance to see this at SEMA, and it's basically Uniden's upcoming custom-installed radar detector. It's going to have 2 radar antennas to give you the arrows. It's also going to have Bluetooth built in, and it's going to come with Uniden's upcoming laser jammers. And the R9 is supposed to launch sometime here in the spring. I don't know exactly when. There hasn't been any ETA announced or price point either, but Uniden is going to be releasing their first custom-installed radar detector and laser jammer called the R9. Next, let's shift gears and take a look at the updates here from Radenso. Starting off with the Radenso DS1, they've released a firmware update, version 1.15. This is just a pretty minor update to improve the Bluetooth capabilities in the DS1. I've also noticed the price point of the DS1 has been fluctuating quite a bit, anywhere between $369 and $469. I just went to go take a look, and on Amazon currently it's listed at $399. Similarly, the Pro M is listed on Radenso's website at $499, but if you take a look over on Amazon, you can find it for $379. Next, let's take a quick look here at the Radenso RCM Ultimate Edition 2.0. This is basically the same radar detector paired with the ALP, their custom installed one. They've made some changes to some of the extras that are included, but the biggest change here is the fact that it now has a lifetime warranty and a lifetime ticket-free guarantee. And then next, talking about Thea, well, Radenso actually has given us an update, finally, talking about Thea. It turns out that due to the supply chain issues and part shortages, they haven't been able to get the parts, and because of that, they've actually chosen to redesign the entire thing around new parts that they're able to acquire. Some of these new parts are going to be more powerful, and this new version of Thea is going to be called Thea 2.0. Radenso says that it's going to be more modular, it's going to be smaller, and overall, it's going to be better. Now, another big thing that they announced is the fact that they're working on a lot of other stuff as well, in addition to Thea, that kind of utilize a lot of the AI capabilities that they've been developing. And their Radenso engineering department is going to be kind of rebranded for all of their new products that they're coming out with, and it's going to be called Radenso Labs. And it sounds like they're kind of prioritizing work on a lot of these new products, and it seems like a lot of these products are actually going to be launched first before Thea comes out. Now, this next part is purely speculation, but kind of what it seems like is it's possible that like they got a bunch of government contracts and they're realizing this is it's a lot bigger than just radar detectors. And so for that reason, they're like, hey, we should prioritize all this other stuff that as a business, we can make a lot more money than just radar detectors themselves. Again, this is just kind of my guess is how I'm looking into it, and I could be totally wrong, but it's kind of starting to seem like Thea itself is going to be kind of on the back burner. They even said that like, okay, they're giving us this update, but they're not going to give us any more updates for the time being. We don't know when it's going to launch, when it's going to be released, anything like that. And they're, in the meantime, like going to be pushing a lot of this other stuff for Radenso Labs. And so Thea was originally announced 3.5 years ago, and I wasn't expecting that we would be in this position of like, well, the thing still isn't here. We don't know when the thing is going to come out. It's a bizarre place to be in. And so I know everybody always asks about Thea. I've done some videos talking about it recently, but I think at this point it's just like, hey, it is what it is. Sounds great, of course, on paper. Sounds awesome, but like, we got to release the thing, and until we have something in our hands, it's probably best to just move on, right? And so we got to talk about Thea, of course, in a video like this. But I think at this point, it's like, hey, let's just start moving on and taking a look at a lot of these other detectors that are actually available, that are coming out, that other companies are working on, that we could probably expect to see sooner. And then next, coming back to stuff that's available now that you can go out and buy today if you'd like to, let's switch gears and talk about the Stinger. So their radar detector with the S850 antenna sounds very promising. There's not a ton of people who own one and have been testing it and sharing their feedback, but it does look like a very capable custom installed radar detector. And I'd like to test it out, especially with the Redline CI coming out and the Uniden R9 coming out. I think the Stinger S850 would be really cool to compare to. But either way, when it comes to Stinger, it's a pricey system, but they're actually coming out with a simpler and more affordable radar detector antenna called the S825. And this is going to be a single polarity antenna instead of an omnidirectional polarity antenna like the S850. And so if that's something that's more suitable for your area and better fits your budget, it's nice to see a more affordable option here available from Stinger. Next, let's move on and take a look at the Valentine 1 Gen 2. Well, this detector has had not just one, but 2 firmware updates. The first one was back in November of 2022. This was firmware version 4.1029. And then the next update was in December of 2022. This was firmware version 4.1030. And the first update back in November, this is the one that had a lot more improvements. There were some very welcome improvements to the detector's Ka falsing issues. There were some changes to the alert behavior, some arrow improvements, and more. And then in December, this one was just a couple minor bug fixes, little things like a bug fix for how the detector reports the battery voltage to the app, as well as a bug fix for the detector's display brightness. And I spent a couple weeks driving with the updated version of the detector, and I found that, yeah, the KA falsing is much better here. I do still experience a number of KA falses, it seems like more than with other detectors, but it's definitely made the detector much more usable here in my experience, and kind of the consensus across the board is it's been a big improvement here in terms of the KA falsing. Next, as far as some of the V1 apps, we'll first start here with V1 Companion. This is an iOS app here for the V1. Now, the biggest improvement here out of all of the changes is the addition now of automatic GPS lockouts here, a lot like V1 Driver has. Additionally, V1 Companion also now has the ability to take advantage of some of the newer features that are now built into the V1 Gen 2 that have been added in some of the more recent firmware versions. For example, the app now has the capability of controlling the V1's volume while you're driving as well. Then as far as JBV1, feels like there's been a new update every week or two. Way too much stuff to cover, but there's been an amazing amount of cool stuff that's been built into JBV1. I don't even know where to begin with that. But yeah, a ton of cool stuff in that app as always. That's probably been like one of the coolest apps and the most frequently updated and just amazing stuff that's being built into JBV1. Again, hats off to John Boy with what you've been doing with that app. And then as far as highway radar, as I mentioned earlier, that detector now also supports the Uniden R4 and the R8 now that the detectors have finally activated their Bluetooth capabilities. And then moving on next to take a look at laser jammers, we're going to start first with Escort. Now with the Redline CI360C that I mentioned earlier, that's going to come with Escort's next generation laser jammer heads called the VX heads. These heads are going to be 50% smaller than the previous generation Shifter Max heads. Additionally, the previous generation heads only supported a max of 4 heads total. There were some things you could do, like maybe use a splitter to add a 5th head or something. But now with this new system, it's actually going to support up to 6 heads. The Redline CI360C is going to come with 5, but it's expandable all the way up to 6 heads. We don't have a ton of details yet in terms of performance improvements, and of course that still has to be tested. But it's nice to see some improvements here from Escort, and I actually like the smaller laser jamming head design to get them fitted into your car into tighter places and also make them less noticeable as well. And then as for TMG, the TMG Alpha 15s, those are now discontinued, and they're actually releasing a new version called the Alpha 17. And these new A17s have new dual diode laser jammers. It's something that they worked on before with the A15s, but now it looks like they've actually got it working well here on the A17s. Additionally, the CPU is being upgraded as well with improved power management. Now, the new heads and the new CPUs are not cross-compatible between the A15s and the A17s, and so if you're upgrading, you are going to need new CPUs and new heads. It does look like the price of the A17s is now going up compared to the previous gen A15s, and so the price gap between the TMGs and the ALP, it's not as big as it used to be, but nevertheless, it's good to see kind of further developments coming along here from TMG. And then finally, to wrap it up, I've been focusing a lot on dash cam stuff as well. It's a little beyond the scope of this video, but the Viofo A139 Pro, I've been testing that one. I've really been liking it so far. That's the first dash cam that has the new next generation Sony Star-Vis 2 sensor. It seems to basically be the best dash cam that's currently available. I've got it installed in my car. I'm really happy with it. I've got it in my wife's car as well. And so for those of you guys who are looking for a dash cam, I'll link to that down in the video description as well. They make like single channel, dual channel, and even triple channel solutions if you want multiple cameras. But like the dash cam and all of the other radar detectors and laser jammers and firmware updates and discussion and all of the stuff that I've talked about here in this video, you'll find information to all of that down below in the description. And so, woo, that was a lot. That was a lot. Yeah, so I guess that's it for now. Hopefully the next video will be sooner than 6 months from now. I'm trying to get better about getting all this stuff done, but it's just, everything's very time consuming, but happy to get this one done and shared with you guys. And so, yeah, that's it for now. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys are doing great, and I'll see you in the next video.